My name is Andrea, and I work on the marketing team here at the Strand. We're really happy you all could be here, especially in light of everything that's been happening over the last week. Um, we feel it's really important to continue turning to books to inform ourselves, to educate ourselves, and make sure we're uplifting Black authors and Black voices. And it's really special that you took the time to come and show up here tonight. So thank you for that. We're here tonight to discuss Brit Bennett's new book, The Vanishing Half. Before I do that, I want to share a little bit about the Strand in case you don't know. We were actually founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass, and our store was on 4th Avenue on Book Row. Book Row stretched from Union Square to Astor Place, and it gradually dwindled from 48 stores to, after 93 years, just the Strand as a sole survivor. It's now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass-Wyden. We want to thank you for all of your support while we've been in quarantine. It's been amazing, and we know without your loyalty and the loyalty of the book community, we wouldn't be here today. So we have tonight Brit Bennett launching her new book, The Vanishing Half. Brit was born and raised in Southern California and graduated from Stanford University, later earned her MFA in fiction at the University of Michigan, where she won a Hopwood Award in graduate short fiction, as well as a 2014 Hurston Wright Award for college writers. At a 5 under 5 honoree, her work is featured in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Jezebel, and more. Her first novel, The Mothers, was a New York Times bestseller. Joining her tonight will be Gloria Edom. Gloria is the founder of Well-Read Black Girl, a Brooklyn-based book club and digital platform that celebrates the uniqueness of Black literature and sisterhood. In the fall of 2017, she organized the first ever Well-Read Black Girl Festival. She has worked as a creative strategist for over 10 years at startups and cultural institutions. Most recently, she was the publishing outreach specialist at Kickstarter. She serves on the board of New York City's Housing Works bookstore. Without further ado, Brit Bennett and Glory Edom.
Hi everybody.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Well, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
It feels very surreal. I mean, you can imagine like everything that's happening in the world right now, and then on top of that, releasing a book into the world. So I'm grateful that people have shown me so much love, but yeah, it feels very deeply surreal.
Well, your book is an amazing break to the chaos of the world.
Thank you.
It is beautifully written, just like The Mothers. And I think I want to start there with that question. You know, The Mothers received so much acclaim. It was a bestseller. It was your first book. It did so well. And now you have your second book. How have you grown from that first experience to now your sophomore title? How does it feel?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think one, as far as the writing of The Vanishing Half, I think I felt a lot more confident when I was writing that book. I knew that I could write a novel because I had done it before. And I knew that if I was patient with myself, and if I kept working on the draft, I could gradually improve it and make it better. So I think that I'm a more confident writer. And I think as far as the publication, I really did not know at all what to expect from The Mothers.
Yeah.
I felt so completely surprised and overwhelmed that people were so supportive of the book and so enthusiastic about it. And I think this time I just wanted to go into the publication process, not stressing or trying not to stress, because so much about that process is out of your control as soon as the book leaves your hands. And certainly publishing during the pandemic has affirmed that to me, that there really is nothing you can control when it's out of your hands. So you have to learn how to just let it go and kind of relax and go with the flow of it.
Yeah. I was reading it and I was thinking, oh, is it going to be like The Mothers? I think there's a part of your brain that kind of thinks about the author's first title. And I think you did a tremendous job of just bringing something fresh and new to this book. In this book, you write from a number of perspectives. You go through time. There are a lot of flashbacks. How did you decide to have this layout and the structure? And if you could share a little bit of the origin story of The Vanishing Half, because it has a very unique story about a very special town. How did you land on that?
Yeah, so the origin story of The Vanishing Half, it came from a conversation I had with my mom, where she was telling me about a town that she remembered from her Louisiana childhood where everyone just intermarried so that their children would get lighter. And it was something that she said to me very offhandedly, as if it were sort of common knowledge. And I was like, wait, go back, tell me more about that. And then when I kind of started looking into the town, I didn't really find anything to corroborate what she was saying, but I found other towns like that within Louisiana that were these Creole towns that were very insular and very sort of, prioritizing lightness. So for me, that became, it was really strange and unsettling and also sort of mythological almost. And that became kind of a jumping point for the novel. I think as far as the other sort of elements of the book, I tried a lot of new things in this book that I didn't necessarily try for the mothers. There are a lot of different timelines. You're kind of moving around in time a little bit non-chronologically, and there are a lot of different narrators. And I think for that, I wanted to kind of expand the story. I wanted this to be a bigger story than the mothers, which was really about this kind of triangle of friends. For me, I was interested in like this family and the multiple generations and how they're changing over, around 40 years of time. And I kind of just wanted to take on that challenge of writing a story that felt a little bit more epic and big.
Yeah, you could feel how expansive it was in each chapter, and it made me very curious. As I was reading, I'm like, what's going to happen next? What relative did this? Like, you can feel that energy. And while we're talking about Louisiana, I want to make sure I'm saying the town's name right. It's Mallard.
Yeah, just Mallard, like the duck.
Mallard. Okay, yes. Okay. I'm not sure. But there was this great quote that I want to read to the community. You were supposed to feel safe in Mallard, the strange, separate town, hidden amongst your own. But even here, where nobody married dark, you were still colored, and that meant that white men could kill you for refusing to die. The twins were reminders of this. Tiny girls in funeral dresses who grew up without a daddy because white men decided it would be so. Right? Like that, even that one quote kind of takes you on this journey because that's not a spoiler, you guys. That happens early in the novel.
Very early in the book, yes.
Yeah, it's very early. And it takes you on this long, as you said, epic journey of their lives. Why did you decide to do twin sisters who have these like kind of separate paths? What led you to make that decision of the twins?
Yeah, I came to that decision fairly early when I had the idea of this town. I get started with the idea of the place. And then when I started thinking about who would live there, the idea of twins felt very natural because, this idea of people who are similar in a lot of ways and different in a lot of ways, I think twins kind of lend themselves easily to kind of metaphor about identity. So I started thinking about what it would be like to live in this place, what it would be like to leave this place. And the idea of one twin who stays and one twin who leaves, that felt like a really kind of natural way to explore the different paths of those characters that extend from the town.
With that, there's this, I mean, I've read a lot of books, and I don't feel like I've read a fiction novel that really delves into colorism in the way that you do, and making really distinct choices on like exposing this kind of, it's almost a myth in the Black community. I don't think sometimes others know that the light skin versus dark skin, how intense that is. Is that something that you were keen about, that you wanted to address colorism as you were writing?
Yeah, I think it was something that I was interested in thinking about, and the way that you just described it as something that's intense and the sort of intense feeling surrounding it. I think I always grew up thinking about color a lot. These were conversations I heard happening around me, and also just things that I observed. It's like when I think about like who set the beauty standard when I was coming of age, it was like, yeah, Halle Berry. Like that was the beauty standard, and the idea of like someone like Lupita being considered like this gorgeous, talented act, like that's not something that I would have imagined when I was a child, which was not a whole long time ago, right. So there were things that I would kind of observe in beauty standards and who's considered beautiful and who's considered desirable, and also just ways in which I would notice people talking about color in a way that I think as I was working on this book, I started to kind of circle around the emotion, which to me felt like shame. Like I feel like there's there can be like these emotions of shame attached to having dark skin, or the ways that people talk about dark skin. And I think that shame is a really difficult emotion to write about, because by its very nature, it kind of resists being looked at. Like, you can't, when you're ashamed of something you've done, you can't look at it directly, you know?
Right.
So the idea of being ashamed of your body and ashamed of your skin, that's something that is hard, I think, to kind of write about or talk about directly. So I wanted to think about the way that it feels and the way that these characters carry this with them. The case of Jude, how she carries that with her even after she's left this place and she's gone to California. And also in the section that you just read, in the way that even though this community prioritizes light skin, it still doesn't prevent them from experiencing this racist violence.
Right.
So they can, you know, create this value system around light skin, but at the end of the day, they are still considered Black and are still treated as such.
And how relevant is that, given, you know, the climate and the landscape of today? There is so much division that's happening, and at the end of the day, you're Black is Black, you know,
Right.
whether you're a light, dark, Black is Black. And I think, as you said, you did a great job of showing two characters, having them be twin sisters and allowing them to be reflections of themselves. And my question is, can you talk about, I guess, what their parallel lives, you know, were? Because they, again, one twin goes in a completely different direction, and how you decide to talk about identity in that way.
Yeah. So the novel opens with Desiree, who's just returned to Mallard. And in the time that she has been gone, she married a dark-skinned man and has a dark-skinned child, and she returns with that child, her daughter Jude. And in the beginning, you don't really know what has come of Stella, and you later find out that she has traveled elsewhere and has started a family of her own with her white husband, and she has a white daughter. And I was kind of interested. I think one thing that interested me is that when my mom was young, she and her sister left Louisiana and went to California together, and they were the only two who really did that, and out of all of her siblings. So I think there's always a part of me it's kind of like, oh, what would my mom's life have been like if she hadn't gone to California, if she'd stayed in Louisiana? Obviously, I wouldn't be here. That's where she met my dad. But I'm always like interested in that. So I think there's a way in which having one twin stay and one twin go allowed me to kind of indulge that thought experiment a little bit. But I think more largely kind of about identity. I think that they make these very different choices, not only in relation to race, but also in relation to family and the types of families that they create. One is in a traditional marriage. One is in this kind of non-traditional sort of long-term, long-distance relationship. One has like a really close relationship with her daughter. The other one has a very strained relationship with her daughter. So I think all of these choices that they make, I think a lot of it comes down to how honest that they can be in their lives. And because Stella has decided to pass for white and she has to hide her entire past from everyone who is close to her, she can't have these intimate relationships that she would want to have because she's always hiding a big part of herself.
Yeah. Let's stay on Stella and Desiree, because I would really like to explore from a craft perspective how you develop their personalities. They felt really fleshed out and real. At some point, I was like really, really upset with Stella. You know, really just like, girl, what is going on? But you do a great job. And this is this is definitely a trait that you have, like that happened in The Mothers too. Like, you feel connected to these characters and you feel really invested in them. As you're building them, like, how does that happen? Can you give us some insight on how you develop your characters?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say you're not the first person to tell me that she was annoyed with Stella. I think that's a common refrain. And at times she annoyed me too, I'll say. But yeah, you know, I think I didn't want it to be like, I remember I had like this children's book that I read as a kid that was like, this is Bobby, this is Johnny, and they were identical twins, and it was like, one likes hot things, one likes cold things, and I didn't want it to be like that, this like directly opposite each other in this really kind of, you know, super neat way. But at the same time, I was interested in how they are these very different women, how Desiree is more outgoing and kind of bolder, and she's sort of funny. And I was interested in how Stella is very guarded and very kind of fearful and really interior. So I wanted definitely there to be some tension between their personalities, but I was also really interested in the moment, again, the part that you read where you hear about how their father was murdered. I was interested in the idea of that moment because they witnessed their father's lynching and they both kind of have these very different emotional reactions to it. You know, Stella, I think that's really what kind of sets Stella on this path of running, where she is constantly just trying to avoid that danger that she witnessed that her father experienced, and she's trying to make sense of it and she can't really make sense of it, versus Desiree, who's able to cope with it a little bit better. I was kind of interested in that being a moment really where, you know, you see characters act, but you also see characters react in a moment where you see them react to the same event very differently.
Yeah, which is so like real life, right? So
right.
I was very moved by the way you showed grief and how someone can move through trauma or not feel resolved by it, like hold it in their body and it changes the trajectory of their whole life, right? Can we talk a little bit more about this idea of trauma within novels and within the Black community? Were there certain books that you were in conversation with? Like I was, especially with the scene with the father passing, I kept like thinking like, where is that from? I mean, obviously it's your mind, you know, but like, you know, did something inspire you to see, like, because you know, with lynchings and things that's so traumatic, like we are exposed to that through history, slavery, obviously, but like, where did that come from for you? That question was a little all over the place, but just go with me.
I mean, I think there were a lot of different moments. I think a lot of texts I drew on were sort of historical texts, more so than other fictional texts. So one of the books I read A Chosen Exile by Allison Hobbs, which is about like the history of passing. And there were lots of really interesting anecdotes in that book about stories of people who had passed and people who had come back to the Black community afterwards, or who had taken all these, you know, people who had passed temporarily, like, you know, someone passed for like a year because they were trying to get this job and then they passed back to being Black, and all these things that were really interesting. You know, I think the really dramatic stories of passing that are in most fiction are more permanent passing because that's dramatically more interesting. But it was like very common for people to pass temporarily, or, you know, like I'm white at work, but I'm Black when I'm at home, or these types
I did not know that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And it was kind of, it wasn't really frowned upon because it was kind of like, well, yeah, you know, you're white at work because they'll pay you more and that's fine. But doing what Stella does, which is I'm completely cutting off from my family and I'm starting, like that is something that is more dramatic narratively and also like much more frowned upon, you know? Right. So I think some of it was drawing on those sort of texts, but I think I was interested in trauma and how that trauma can be inherited, and also how that trauma can be healed or healed from. And you know, I think that's something that's so striking about family, because we really do inherit this trauma from our parents and from our family that we may have no idea where it comes from or why. So in the case of Stella's daughter, Kennedy, who sees her mother as hyper vigilant, and she never understands why her mom is so jumpy, because she doesn't know that her mother witnessed her father's lynching when she was a child. Right. So she's still like inherited that trauma that she has no way of having any context for or understanding at all.
I also want to talk about that, again, that inheritance, like what you get from your family when you least expect it. Because I feel like everyone's going through kind of these distinct transformations, whether it's Jude and Renee, or, you know, Stella and Desiree. Everyone's like kind of transforming themselves, but they don't know how they're impacting the other person. You know, right. Everyone's kind of like moving in moments. Was that an intentional choice? Like when you were writing Jude, did you know the relationship with Renee was going to end up that way? Do you write your characters in silos, or is it kind of this interconnected thing?
I think kind of both. Like I knew with Jude, I knew that I wanted her to have this love story where she, like, I really needed her to have a win when she grew up in this really terrible environment, and she's been through a lot, and I wanted her to find love and find friendship and find community, and that's what she ends up finding through Reese and their friends when they are in LA. So I knew kind of separately, I kind of knew that I wanted her to have that love story. And the same thing with most of the characters. Like I kind of had an idea of who they were, but I think that characters become really interesting through their relationships. Like thinking about them in isolation is way less interesting than when you think about how they bounce off of the people near them. So for me, like, I really wanted to see, like I said, I wanted to see Jude in a different element than Mallory, where she'd grown up feeling like a total outcast. I wanted to see her find love and community and sort of be transformed through that.
Right. I want to say the same thing. Like with Jude, I was so impressed with her ability to be vulnerable and open. Even when she was feeling like an outcast, like she didn't belong, you made her so transparent with her process. And I felt like it reflected a lot of coming of age stories, you know, like there's sometimes you're like, maybe you're not that popular in high school, but suddenly you get to college and you're a whole different person, you know, like it's so needed. With her being a darker skinned character, do you think, like, what were you trying to express to the reader? You know, like, what were you trying to say about her life and her different decisions, going to California, being a track star, like all these things in her life? How did you make her, what am I trying to say, just so special? Like, she seems like a standout character in the novel.
Thank you. Yeah, she ends up taking over a large part of the novel in a way that I didn't expect her to. And I think part of that, like, at first I thought I was just going to focus on when she was a child growing up in this place. And then I realized that was very flat, because like what happens to her is exactly what you know is going to happen to her. The first page, when you see her arriving in this place, you know it's going to be bad, and it's bad. So I didn't want to not show what that was like, but I was more interested in kind of the ripples that caused in her as she leaves the place, as she becomes a woman, as she kind of goes out into the larger world. So it was more interesting to me to kind of think about how she is sort of formed in this place, and how she has to break out of that, because it's not just, you know, I have been, you know, mistreated in this place. It's like she carries that stuff with her, and she has to fight actively against it. So I found that really moving, to try to see her learn how to, like you said, learn how to be vulnerable, open up, and trust, learn how to trust relationships, learning how to love herself, and how to fight against this really toxic ideology that she's really been spoon-fed since she was a young child.
Right. And as you said, she does find love. No spoilers, of course, but she does find a love with Reese. And Reese is definitely an awesome character. And if that storyline, I was so impressed with that, because it took me by surprise in a good way. And Reese isn't necessarily trying to, you know, everyone's trying to change something. Stella does race, it's in terms of race. With Reese, it's in terms of gender. Do you think the questions of race and gender are similar, or are they different? And would you consider what Reese doing like a form of passing as well?
Yeah. So for Reese, I was really I was kind of interested in Reese as sort of a counterpoint to Stella. I was really interested in how his story is so different, because I think they both are these characters that are reinventing themselves, and that kind of leads into the thematics that what you're saying about people changing and transforming. But at the same time, Reese is not pretending to be somebody that he's not in the way that Stella is. He changes physically, but it actually is just affirming who he has always been. Versus Stella does not change. Like, she does not adopt a physical change. She doesn't even change her name. And at the same time, she becomes like this completely different person mentally and emotionally. And she's so far from herself. So, you know, I think that is a difference sort of in that relationship. But yeah, I was interested. I wanted to write a love story. I didn't want to just write about Black pain. I wanted to write about Black love in this book. And I think there are a few different love stories that are kind of operating.
Yeah, there's a familial love. There's there's romantic love. There's the intimacy of friendship and how it develops, how it can unravel at times and come back together. There, all those things feel like they're all connected throughout the story. I know we're going to take questions from the community too. I know things are popping up. Let me see. Is Strand going to come in here and take the questions, or how should we? I see something happening. Okay.
Here. I have a little thing that slides over my camera function, and I unslide it. Yeah, we have a couple questions coming in from all of our platforms, so let's dive into those. Carol is asking, she has a couple of great questions actually. Her first question, I'm wondering who Brit perceived her audience was when she wrote the book. Did she consider it at all?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think that I always imagine myself writing to my community. So particularly community of Black women. It's kind of who I imagine that I'm writing to. But I think that that's what's cool about fiction is like when you're writing specifically in a specific context, it can apply more widely. I know like with the mothers, I wrote about, these teenagers in Oceanside, California, which most people have no idea where Oceanside, California is and why would you? But I remember like I would go talk to people about that book in like Italy and they were like deeply connecting to this story across like culture and language and race and all these other things. And they're like, yeah, we have those church ladies here. We know what that's like. So, I think that is a cool thing. So I think with this book, I really wanted I kind of thought of it as a little bit of a love letter to my community. And I hope that, people, especially now when we're living in multiple very depressing and stressful timelines, I hope that people enjoy it and find joy from the book.
Absolutely. It is so nice to find like a small town connection in another small town that no one's heard of. You're
yes.
Like, oh, I get that. Another question from Carol. How much of one of these characters comes from the author's sense of herself?
Ooh. I think that there's a lot of me kind of sprinkled into a lot of these characters. I described Stella as being very guarded, and I can certainly be that way. I think Jude is ambitious, and I think I kind of share her ambition and a little bit of her restlessness. I guess Desiree is loyal. I think that I am loyal to my family. So I think there's a little bit of me fractured into all of these characters in some way. And I think that's also what's really fun about writing is being able to kind of explore. As you notice, I only said like positive traits about myself. So there are also the negative traits too. I don't need to go into that, but those are there too.
We're focusing on the positive.
Yes.
Kimberly I have another screen over here. I'm looking at Kimberly on Facebook is asking, Carla, did you visit any of the towns that were mentioned in the book as an inspiration?
I mean, no, not. I went to Louisiana to visit family, so I've gone down. I've spent a lot of most of my time. I'm like, going to New Orleans and like going to a larger city versus some of these smaller places. But yeah, my mom grew up in Palmetto, so that's mentioned in the book. So there are sort of some family connections to it in that way geographically. But yeah, I spent like my last New Year's in New Orleans. I love that city, so I enjoyed kind of writing towards a sort of slightly more historic New Orleans, and the idea of New Orleans is like the big bad city, which is the way that my mom felt that like that's what her mother told her it was when she was young, that it was kind of the dangerous city, don't go there. And that's the city that I love. So I was able to use some kind of family, some family visits and some family space to draw on, I think.
Awesome. Okay, Lonnie is asking, what is the most important building block for you? The sentence, the character, something else?
Ooh, these are really good questions.
Yeah.
Oh, the most important building block. I think I would say the characters. I think that's really where I start. Like usually I'll have kind of an idea. Like I knew that I wanted to start this book with a person returning. And some people have like pointed out their eyes were watching God. And I think that is that's such a useful frame for a book of like, this person has returned and we don't know where they've come from. That's like a great way to enter a story. So I do think that there is sort of a call to that, as far as this character mysteriously returning and everybody wondering what happened to her. So I knew that I wanted to start with these twin sisters. I wanted to explore their lives, and then eventually realized I wanted to explore their daughters' lives. But I think I'm not super precious about sentences. I'm very willing to slash sentences to pieces and tear them apart and get rid of things. But character is what I really care about. And if I feel like the characters are not working, that's when I'm really going to be frustrated with what I'm working on.
I will say that there is this one sentence that I loved. There were many ways to be alienated from someone you to actually belong. And I thought that was such a good sentence.
Thank you.
That's really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Coming in strong with the quotes. Thank you. Karen, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Karen is so excited to read your book, and sorry if she missed this, but has your mom read the book already?
Thank you, Karen. Yes, my mom has read the book. I was very nervous about her reading it. I'm nervous always about my family reading it and what they're going to think, but everyone in my family really enjoyed it. So I haven't heard from my Louisiana relatives yet. I don't know if they've read the book yet, but I am curious to see what they're going to think about it, and how they'll connect to the story.
Is there any particular person or persons, whether you know or not, that you get the most anxious about reading your book? A book in general that you've written, not particularly this one.
I mean, I think, it's hard not to say my parents, because there's an element that's, are they going to enjoy the aesthetic of it? Are they going to enjoy it as a story? And then there's also that element of oh, did I cuss in this book? Are they sexy? You're thinking about those types of things. And, I really do think you have to, if you want to write, you just have to block that all out of your mind and tell the story you want to tell and deal with however people respond to it later. Because if I were writing with that sort of at the forefront of my mind, I would be very sort of handcuffed to the type of stories that I could tell, because I think to some extent your parents always kind of see you as their child. So I think that's those are people that I'm always, I usually don't show them until we have galleys. So by then we're so deep into the project, there's no turning back. And this is what the book is.
Let's see. Jessica is asking, what is your writing style like? And thank you for sharing your wonderful art.
Thank you. So I'm assuming you mean my writing routine or process maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm someone I have to work in the mornings. I'm quite useless after dinner. Okay, routine. Thank you. No, you're fine. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so I have to work in the mornings. I'm useless at night. My brain just turns to mush after dinner. So so I have to work in the morning. I like to do my routine during quarantine, which I have been judged for by my friends, was I had an hour. As soon as I woke up, I had an hour with no coffee and just write for that hour. And everybody's just that's crazy, which it is a little bit, but that it gave me an incentive to I have to write so I can get the coffee, which was helpful. And it also was I can't judge anything I've written in this hour because I didn't have my coffee. So it kind of allowed me to kickstart my morning with some writing that I told myself afterwards I was not going to judge the merit of it. It was just about getting words on the page. So I do a lot of tricks to kind of manipulate myself and to keep going and to not being too judgmental and not being too precious about my writing. And I don't worry about word count. I just try to put in the time. So try to put in at least a couple hours every day, and whatever I accomplish in that time, I accomplish. Thank you.
Carol is asking, along the way, who did you ask for advice and reflection on the book?
Ooh, so yeah, with the Vanishing Half, it was really my agent Julia, my editor Sarah, and we started working on it, all of us, kind of putting our heads together, pretty, I mean, I don't remember, maybe 2016 or something. It took us a lot of drafts to try to wrangle this book, for all those reasons that Gloria was saying. There's a lot of elements, or a lot of characters, or all these timelines. So it took us a while to kind of figure out, but they were really vital to my process of getting it done. And it was very different than writing the mothers, where I was in workshop at my MFA program for part of that process. So instead of having like 12 people in the room with you, it was just the three of us, which in a lot of ways is far less chaotic. But also you really have to depend on those other two people that are giving you feedback. So I'm grateful for them and grateful for their patience, as it took so many years of trying to get this book right.
Absolutely. I'm going to do a last call for questions. If you have any questions left, please either put them in the chat or use the Q&A function. We get them either way. But we do have another question from Majoli. You mentioned switching back and forth in time. What strategies did you use to keep the plot's integrity unbroken while switching?
Ooh, that's a good question also. I mean, the easiest way that I thought about, I knew that there would be sections in the book because it felt like these were divided stories. Like it was a story about this fractured family. So it felt like there needed to be that fracture represented somehow in the narrative. It didn't really make sense for me to kind of flow seamlessly between these characters because they're living such fractured lives. These sisters who are living the overwhelming majority of their life apart from each other. So I knew that I would have these section breaks, and I wanted to think about those moments when I left the characters and when I returned to them. So for an example, Jude, you see her first as a child, and then you kind of jump ahead of time and you see her when she's older. So there were moments like that I wanted to be kind of strategic with the time. And I think for me, I just love that as a reader. I love when you're just like, of course you don't want it to feel haphazard, but I love when you were just like, and now we are suddenly 10 years. And then I'm like, oh, well, what's everything that happened while we were gone? And there's kind of some tension built in from that, where you're trying to unravel what has happened to the characters since you last saw them. And I think there's also a way in which that feels true to life. You meet people and sometimes they fade from your lives, and then sometimes you pick them back up again and you have to kind of figure out who they are now versus who you knew them. So I think that was one of the ways in which I thought about it. I knew that I wanted to have these clear sections, and I knew I just had to think about where I wanted to leave characters and where I wanted to meet them again.
Definitely. And then we've got one more question. I don't know who sent it, but thank you for sending it. This will be our last question, second to last question. What challenges did you find in researching those who pass in the 21st century? Obviously, there are classic novels like Passing that tackle this topic, but it's not something that many of us think might happen today.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, that was one of the things that was really interesting about the idea of passing, which is that it's sort of inherently unknowable. The idea that if somebody has passed successfully, then you would not know that they have done it. So there's no way that we will ever have a correct, like an accurate toll of all the people who have passed. We only know the people who have gotten caught, or the people who have decided they didn't want to pass anymore, or who have revealed themselves to us. So to me, there was something inherently really interesting and mysterious about that. And I think that kind of leads to some of the murkiness and the history behind it. But that's also why I think I was drawn really to the literature of Passing. You just mentioned Nella Larson's Passing, which was a book I read in college. And it's such a really beautiful and also very nuanced book, and kind of tackling the complexity of community and friendship and what it means to have solidarity within a community. So I really loved that book. And I think that those types of literatures, I saw the film of Imitation of Life, if anyone has seen it. That was a movie I watched when I was young, and I think that was probably the first thing I ever saw on Passing, and I found it so strange. I found it really unthinkable why somebody would do this. So there was kind of stories like that I was actually, I think, a bit more interested in than the actual history. And I think that those stories, they're often quite moralizing, where the character who passes is somehow punished at the end, often through death, as in Passing, or some other form of sort of comeuppance. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. I was not interested in punishing Stella. I wasn't interested in condemning Stella for these choices. I was really just interested in how her life is changed by this choice that she makes, and how it changes the rest of the family.
Yeah. Ariana is asking, are there any ideas you had for the book that didn't make it? If so, how did it feel having them taken out? Also, I'm really excited to read it.
Thank you. Yeah, there are lots of ideas. I mean, the really easy one is that originally the twins had a brother who was a priest. So there was like this whole like Catholicism like side of things. And I don't really remember what I was going to do with that, but I just remember being like, yeah, there needs to be a third child. And then I realized like, no, actually, I'm really just interested in these two sisters. And I'm also interested in their relationship with their mother, and having this other person there was kind of blocking that relationship, because like Desiree would be talking to the brother instead of talking to her mother. And I was like, that's not as interesting. So that was a character that I had to get rid of. And fortunately, I got rid of him pretty early. It was before that I got really emotionally attached to him. But sometimes it does happen that way, where you've been working on a character for drafts and you realize that this is not the right book for that person. And it can be really devastating, but I always think about it like, maybe this isn't the right book for this character, but maybe he can pop up in some other book or some other story I'm working on later. Like I can sort of save him for something else. So I don't think that once you cut the character, if you cut a plot line, it's not gone forever. I think it's something that, it's something my dad told me, where he was like, this is your first book, but it's not your only book. So I felt that way also with this book. Like, it's my second book. It's not my only book. It's, hopefully not the last book I will ever write. So I don't have to put every single thing I love and everything that interests me in this book.
So the preacher in book 3.
Maybe a cameo. I don't know. It's a really different, that's like a whole other different beast that I'm working on with that one, but maybe.
All right. I know I said that was the last question, but I'm going to do this one last question because we're from a bookstore and I want to know.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of a combo. How have you been handling virtual promotion of your book? And also, what are some other books and authors you've been reading lately?
Yes. So the first question, it's been strange and different to do virtual promotion. And I miss going to bookstores and actually meeting readers face to face and signing books and, seeing your friends when you're in various cities and seeing people where they live. But at the same time, I've been really impressed by the fact that virtual events can be fun in like a really different way. I was saying before this started that I had an event at like my hometown bookstore, and my 11th grade English teacher popped up. So you can have those really nice moments, I think, on virtual events that are really fun and sweet, and also more accessible because you don't have to live in New York to go to this event, So I'm grateful for that. And I'm also just really impressed by how bookstores have really rallied under these unprecedented times. I know that everyone has had to adjust so dramatically, but it's been really cool to see these events pop up online. And as far as what I've been reading lots of different things. I've been reading books that I loved. I really loved The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, which came out, I think, right at the beginning of quarantine. That was the first book I read. Yeah, it was the first book I read in lockdown that I finally finished because I had no attention span for first few weeks, I think, as many of us can relate to. So once I started reading that book, it really unlocked the floodgates for me, and I just felt like alive again, that I was just reading something that was so propulsive and compelling and really beautifully written. It's about a Ponzi scheme and all of the characters involved in it. It's about kind of the Great Recession. So it's about a different, national and international catastrophe, but a little bit more, I guess, a recent history instead of the one that we're currently living through. So that there's a little bit of escapism there, maybe, to not be thinking directly about this moment. So I read that. I really loved the book Actress by Anne Enright, which I think is also came out fairly recently. And it's about the daughter of an Irish theater legend, and this woman who's left to kind of be the keeper of her mother's legacy and piece together all of these things about her mother's life. So those are two books that I read recently that I really loved, and were really great quarantine reads. They both are very transportive. They both take place in lots of different parts of the world, and there are lots of parties. There are lots of these other elements that now feel very science fiction, but you can read about parties in these books. So there's a little bit of escapism, I think, in a lot of different ways.
Awesome. I love it. I want to read both of them. I actually didn't know about one of those books, so adding it to the list. Any final reflections or anything you guys want to share before we sign off?
Are there any questions that, no one's asked you, Brit, that you'd like them to ask you?
Oh, that's tough. I don't know. I'm not as imaginative in the questions as everyone has been tonight. There were several questions I was asked tonight that I have never been asked. So I'm unfortunately not as imaginative about these types of things, but I wanted to thank you, Gloria, for doing this event. I wanted to thank the Strand. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. You all had plenty of other things that you could be doing or watching or reading. So yeah, I'm grateful for everyone. Please support the Strand, support your local bookstores.
Thank you guys both so much. This was awesome. I hope we get to see you again in real life someday.
Yeah.
If you want to purchase a copy of The Vanishing Half, I dropped the link in the chat, or you can just visit Strand. And thank you again, everyone, so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.